The human mind, confined as it is to the perception of three spatial dimensions and one of time, has always struggled to conceive of realities beyond its immediate sensory reach. We are prisoners of our own physics, unable to see the world as it might truly be, but only as our limited senses allow us to perceive it. This fundamental limitation is the very heart of a concept that astrophysicist Neil deGrasse Tyson returns to time and again when exploring the nature of intelligence, the universe, and our place within it, the profound implications of higher dimensions. To explain why an alien intelligence might seem as a god to us, Tyson invokes a brilliant and enduring thought experiment from the Victorian era, Edwin Abbott Abbott's novella, Flatland. The relationship between Tyson's ideas and the Flatland analogy is not merely one of casual reference. It is the very cornerstone of his argument for the potential omniscience and omnipotence of higher dimensional beings. By dissecting this analogy, we can see how Tyson uses this mathematical fiction to ground a truly mind-bending concept, that a superior intelligence's power might stem not from advanced technology, but from a fundamental advantage in the very architecture of reality. To appreciate the power of Neil deGrasse Tyson's use of the Flatland analogy, we must first understand the source material itself. Published in 1884 by Edwin Abbott, Flatland, A Romance of Many Dimensions is a work that defies easy categorization. It is at once a mathematical primer, a sharp social satire, and a thrilling work of speculative fiction. The novella is narrated by Square, a humble, middle-class square who lives in a two-dimensional world known as Flatland. In this universe, all beings are geometric shapes. The social hierarchy is rigidly defined by the number of sides one has. Lowly women are mere straight lines, soldiers and working-class men are triangles, squares are professionals like Square, pentagons are nobility, and the highest priests are many-sided figures that appear to be perfect circles. This rigid, patriarchal society is a thinly veiled satire of the classist and misogynistic structures of Victorian England, a society Abbott sought to critique through this geometric metaphor. The story's narrative thrust begins when Square is visited by a sphere from the third dimension, a being he cannot comprehend. The sphere attempts to explain the concept of upward to Square, but the two-dimensional mind can only grasp height and width. Depth is a heretical, nonsensical concept. The sphere eventually resorts to pulling Square out of Flatland and into Spaceland, allowing him to see his entire two-dimensional world and its inhabitants all at once. Square can now see inside the houses of Flatland and view every citizen from a perspective that is, to the Flatlanders, impossible. When he returns to his world, he is imprisoned for espousing these heretical views. Flatland serves as the perfect allegory for the limitations of human consciousness. Just as Square could not conceive of a third dimension until he experienced it, we cannot truly imagine a fourth spatial dimension. It is this very limitation that Neil deGrasse Tyson weaponizes in his public discourse. The novella provides a perfect model of intellectual confinement, and it is this model that Tyson uses to extrapolate our own relationship to a hypothetical fourth-dimensional intelligence. Neil deGrasse Tyson's genius as a science communicator lies in his ability to take abstract concepts and ground them in powerful analogies. He frequently uses the Flatland analogy not as a historical curiosity, but as a primary pedagogical tool to explain how a being in a higher dimension could possess abilities that are indistinguishable from magic. His argument flows directly from the logic of the book. First, Tyson establishes the core limitation. We are three-dimensional beings, and just as Square was trapped within the plane of his existence, we are trapped within the volume of ours. We can perceive length, width, and height, but we cannot perceive or access the fourth spatial dimension. We cannot see around the confines of our 3D space. We can only see surfaces. The interior of an object is hidden from us by its own geometry. From this foundational limitation, Tyson takes the next logical step, which is the central pillar of his argument. He explains that a fourth-dimensional being looking at us would be in the same position as we are when looking at a two-dimensional drawing on a piece of paper. As three-dimensional beings, we can see the entire drawing all at once. We can see its shape, and, more importantly, we can see inside it. We can see the lines that make it up and understand its composition. There is no inside of the drawing that is hidden from us. As Neil deGrasse Tyson has put it, a four-dimensional person could see every one of our organs at all times. He further explains that if you live in a higher dimension relative to some community of beings, you are all-powerful and all-knowing in ways they will never understand or imagine. To a four-dimensional being, our skin is not a boundary to be crossed. It is merely a surface to be observed. Our internal organs, our bones, our very thoughts, as represented in brain chemistry, would be completely transparent and accessible to their perception. The implications of this observation are what truly make Tyson's presentation of this concept so compelling. He moves from the idea of pure perception to the idea of physical manipulation, and it is here that the alien intelligence becomes truly godlike. For a 4D being, the distinction between what is inside and outside a 3D object is meaningless. This leads Tyson to one of his most famous speculative thought experiments, the concept of 4D surgery. He envisions a future where medicine is revolutionized because of being, or perhaps our own technology, could access our bodies from the fourth dimension. Instead of cutting through layers of skin, muscle, and bone, a 4D surgeon could simply reach into the fourth dimension and remove a tumor, a kidney stone, or a damaged organ from a direction we cannot perceive or access. The future of surgery, Tyson suggests, could be four-dimensional surgery, where they come at you from a fourth dimension and never have to cut you open. To a patient, this would seem like an act of pure magic or a miracle. An object simply disappears from their body with no incision, no scar, and no recovery time. This is a direct analogy to the sphere removing the circle's treasure from its impenetrable vault in Flatland by simply lifting it into Spaceland. The final, and perhaps most profound, conclusion Tyson draws from this line of reasoning is the conflation of high-dimensional intelligence with divinity. He argues that the powers of such a being are indistinguishable from what a higher and deeply religious people will say knows all and is all-powerful. The characteristics that religions have historically attributed to a supreme being, omnipotence, omniscience, and the ability to perform miracles that defy the laws of nature, are exactly the characteristics that a being from the fourth dimension would possess from our perspective. They would be all-knowing because they could see everything in our world simultaneously, including our innermost secrets. They would be all-powerful because they could manipulate our physical reality without any of the constraints of our three-dimensional physics. Tyson then takes the thought experiment one step further, suggesting a hierarchy of gods, where a fifth-dimensional being would be a god to a fourth-dimensional being, and so on up the dimensional ladder. This creates a fascinating and somewhat chilling perspective on the nature of divinity, that the very concept of a deity might simply be a misinterpretation of a higher dimensional reality. The genius of the Flatland analogy is that it makes this abstract, almost nonsensical idea palatable. It provides a framework for our own inferiority. If we can see a 2D being and know everything about its world, then it is only logical that a 4D being can see us and know everything about ours. And if we can interact with a 2D world in ways that are physically impossible for its inhabitants, like moving in a direction they cannot perceive, or removing objects without breaking their perimeter, then a 4D being could do the same to us. Tyson's use of the Flatland analogy is thus not just a charming reference to a Victorian classic. It is a brilliant rhetorical device that allows us to comprehend the incomprehensible. It allows us to understand how a being from the fourth dimension could be so much smarter than us, not because they have better computers or more advanced spaceships, but because they exist in a reality that is simply richer, more complete, and more powerful than our own. They see the tapestry of our universe not from within the weave, but from above it.